All right, so now that you know what is a personal brand and you know the elements of a personal brand, today we're going to talk about how do you actually go about defining your brand. So the first thing I would do is actually go around and ask the people that know you the most, whether it's personal relationships or professional relationships. What are 3 words that they would use to describe you? So basically what you're doing here is you're figuring out your essence. So are you a leader? Are you someone who is responsible, resourceful, right? So these are like the 3 words that you would generally use to describe yourself, or other people would use to describe you. So that's the first place I would start when you're defining your brand. Now, the second thing is sometimes we actually never sit down and self-reflect. So the second step I would say is really sitting and doing some self-discoveries and self-reflection. Now, as part of this, I mentioned this before too, is what are some of the experiences that have defined who you've become and why you make certain decisions? Do you know what your mission is in this lifetime? What are you super passionate about? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And what are some of your unique characteristics? Like if you are someone who does clinical psychology, what makes you the best clinical psychologist, or what makes you different from any other clinical psychologist? Okay, the next thing I would say is think about who your target audience is. Now, if I can still have the same branding, but the way I message it will be different if I'm in a, for example, I'm running for the board, for my HOA board. So how I speak to them and the parts of my personal branding that I will highlight might be slightly different from the personal branding that I would highlight in this case as a coach versus if I was meeting someone on a date. So I'm still the same person, but which part of that personality I want to highlight might be tweaked just a little bit. So let me give you an example of this, right? So for example, when I was a product management, and the best way to think about this is the tell me about yourself type of question that we get in interviews. I used to hate this question, and now I absolutely love it. Because you can really guide where the conversation goes and how much the person actually gets to know about you. So a lot of times people will go into this question and say, oh, well, I studied this and I went and did this thing and I did this other thing. I'm going to challenge you to reverse this, right? So go back to the essence, go back to what's your secret sauce. So when I was going into more leadership roles in product management, I would start with highlighting 3 things. I am someone who is operational, technical, as well as strategic. Now, why is that very important, right? So most of the time, I would see either product managers who are very technical, or I would see product managers who are very business-oriented or very user-oriented. And the fact that I could be technical and I understood operations and I could also do strategy meant I could basically have conversations cross-functionally at any level within the company, which is very, very powerful and very, very unique. And that was what made me successful as a product manager. So I would start with I'm technical, operational, and I'm strategic. I started off in engineering, I moved into product management. Here's why. Here's that happened. I quickly progressed into a management level position, and then I switched into a different industry, and that brings me here. This is basically the summary of kind of how I would answer that question. Now, if I were to give you my pitch, for example, as a transformational coach, people would think, well, you are a product manager. Why should I listen to you as a coach, right? It wouldn't make sense. But here's how that makes sense now. So I have programs that are both personal development as well as professional development. So my professional development coaching actually comes a lot from the experience that I had as an individual working through corporate America and working through growing in the ladder. And so I started off as an engineer, moved into product management, and my first couple of years were really tough. I started off, I graduated undergrad in 2008 during the Great Recession. So it took me a couple of years to get started, but then I figured out how to get my foot in the door. Then I went into studying and doing my master's. So I shifted subjects. I went from genetics to computer science and engineering. I studied full-time, I worked full-time, I got into engineering, and then I learned how to shift into product management, which is really what I wanted to do. So you can see here, as I'm developing this story, I'm saying I started off as someone who just graduated. I've been in your shoes as a fresh graduate, not being able to find a job and really struggling to figure out what I was going to do next. Then I did graduate school and I figured out how to get into engineering, but I shifted gears and I've learned how to make that internal transition. Then once I was in product management, I had a quick succession of promotions. So I had 4 promotions within 5 years. And so again, same thing. I learned how to message up and work my way up within an organization. Then I shifted to a different industry. I figured out the messaging behind that. I figured out how to go from a technical product management role to more of an enterprise role. So I reshifted my branding. So if you actually look at my career, I've rebranded myself so many times. And each time it was very strategic and I really thought about where am I taking my career next. So I moved into a different industry, I moved up in terms of management, and then I had a serious shift in my personal life. My belief system completely changed. And so over the last 5 years, I went through a very big personal transformation. I learned different modalities in personal transformation. And that's what brings me here now and why I can serve as a personal transformation coach. And so, again, very similarly, it's about how you're telling your story, how you're branding yourself, and really knowing the vision of where you want to go. Okay, so the next thing is you have to be consistent and you have to be clear and you have to be constantly doing this. And you have to show your expertise, right? So this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing these videos. I want to be able to share what I've learned over the years. So personal development is something that's very much you go through on your own, and the experience that I had, it was so solitary, right? And there's so many people who are going through these types of transitions now where it's just like, I've been doing this my whole life, but like, I don't think this is connecting with me anymore, but I don't know how to shift it, right? And I mean, I made a huge shift, but if you actually think about it, my shift really makes sense. And so that's the idea, is you really have to know your story, what makes you, for you to be able to then convey that to the rest of the world and have them believe it. Okay, so the question is, who are you being? Everywhere, in any situation, you shouldn't really have to change your personality. It's more of emphasizing different parts of your personality in different environments. But you, essentially, every day, everywhere you are, the idea is if you are being yourself and you are living in your essence, then you're living a much happier life that's more in flow. Okay? So, I hope you have a great time defining your brand. And if you have any questions on how to do this, if you need any help, go to my website. It's www.journeyhomewithbalori.com, and I would love to work through this with you. Don't forget to come here tomorrow, because I'm going to talk about how do you actually convey what your brand is through the whole interview process. So I will see you tomorrow, and happy branding.